So hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Engaging Your Remote Workforce, Both Challenges, Concerns, and Solutions. This webinar is actually part 4 of our 4-part series hosted by the Association of Talent Development in New Orleans. My name is Darlene Lenyuk, and I'm the president of the ATD NOLA chapter. And I'll be assisting Tiffany today as the moderator for our webinar. So I have a few housekeeping tips to share with you guys before we begin. We're going to go ahead and mute everybody during the call today. We're also recording so you can access the webinar after today, early next week, by going to our website. We are expecting a very interactive session, so we'll be asking you guys to respond by chat, and I think even at some point, we might open it up to some group discussions. So we love to hear from everybody so that we can learn from each other. Also, too, towards the end of the program, Tiffany created a PDF that I'll be sharing with everybody through our chat box. And lastly, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties at all, you can send me a direct chat through the Zoom, and I'll help you work through that. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce to you guys Tiffany Landrum. She's the past ATD NOLA chapter president, and she has been in the L&D field for over 20 years, where she works for Whitney Hancock Bank, and right now is helping them to lead some change initiative strategies throughout the organization. And you know, before I turn it over to Tiffany, let me tell you guys this really quick. If you haven't had a chance to visit our website, I really encourage you to do so. Go to tdnola.org. What you're going to find is that we have some great upcoming programs. Disney will be with us. We're scheduled to have them in the convention center in July. And also in August, we'll be talking about design thinking, and that's another ILT course that we'll be having at the convention center. So if you haven't signed up for it, if you're looking for more information, great opportunity to go to the website to learn a little bit more about our upcoming programs. In addition to that, we have had such a phenomenal feedback about these webinars that we've been running for the past 4 weeks. And we know that everybody on the call, that you guys have friends that have such a wealth of knowledge and information. So if you are interested in hosting and facilitating a lunch webinar like we're doing today, we want to hear from you. We would love to be able to take and offer that to both you and to our members. And you can do that really easily by filling out a speaker's request form. And that's located on the website too. So you just go to tdnola.org, look at events, go to speaker request form, and tell us a little bit about yourself and the information you would like to present to the group. And so we would love to hear from you guys. So I'm all about the content. Can't wait to learn from Tiffany today. So I'm going to stop talking at this point and turn it on over to Tiffany. Good morning.
Hey, great. Good morning, or is it afternoon yet?
It is afternoon. I do
hey,
think
everybody.
so.
Let's just say hey. So, you know, that's kind of par for the course because we're all in this, like, different plane of reality, it feels like, you know, ever since the whole pandemic has struck. So, you know, this whole COVID-19 situation has just drop-kicked us into a new reality. And we have all these new words like pandemic and social distancing, shelter in place, personal protective equipment or PPE, and this whole, you know, community spread thing. So we have just been literally drop-kicked into a new reality. And for a lot of us, that means, you know, our regular storefronts or offices are closed, you know, due to the coronavirus. So, you know, we're facing something that's, you know, a bit unprecedented. You know, it's not that remote working is a new concept. In fact, you know, there's some sources out there that suggest like 25% of the U.S. workforce was already working remotely, at least part-time. So it's not that it's a new concept. What makes what has happened here recently so unique is that it was completely unplanned. There was no careful transition period, where things were thought through and you had time to coordinate with IT, for the resources that you need, ensure you had VPN set up, ensure, you had laptops, that could be sent home for people, or that, whether they bring their own device or use one that's provided by the company. There was no time to, send out the guidelines and policies about remote working and say, hey, review this and we'll meet next week and see if you have any questions. I mean, that just didn't happen. This literally happened. It felt like over a weekend. And then all of a sudden, school closures were announced and business closures, were announced. So what makes this whole thing unique is that it was not planned. And there was no careful transition that so many of the previous work from home workers benefited from. So this was, kind of really thrust on us really quick because of the pandemic. And along with that, because it was such a jarring change, and I still think I'm going to wake up and find that this was all just a bad dream. And if you told me last year that there would be a time when everything was closed and you couldn't go to restaurants and you had to wear masks in public and, all this other stuff, I'd be like, oh, take your conspiracy theory somewhere else. I'm not interested. But this is reality, and it is stressful. And as a manager, you might very well feel like this lady in the image on the screen, and because it is stressful. What's important, though, is that as a leader, you understand that your team looks to you for how they should be reacting. So if they sense the panic, the chaos, the uncertainty and the doubt that we can really do this, or if they sense that you don't trust them or we just don't trust each other, to work independently under these conditions, that's going to come through. So it's just real important that as a leader, you conduct yourself accordingly, that you remember, you've heard the story about the duck that looks like it's gliding along the water's surface when in fact it's going against the current and it's, paddling like all get out underneath the surface, just to keep up. It looks nice and calm on the surface, but it's really not. That's kind of what we need to do as leaders. And it's not that we can't acknowledge the stress. We just can't let it rule us. So, your whole demeanor and your positive, we can do this kind of attitude can be as contagious as a negative attitude. So make sure you pick the one that you want to convey and that you want others to pick up on. So another thing as a leader that's going to be important to recognize is that even under the best of circumstances, when you have a remote workforce that's planned, even they can sometimes feel isolated or they're kind of left behind or left out of the group. But now that you have people that were never expecting to work in this way, at home, we can't even have social interactions. So, a lot of the things that we depend on as human beings and part of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been, they've taken a big hit. So it's important that you understand that people can feel isolated and disconnected, and that you do things to overcome that. It's hard because if you're used to being in a traditional workspace, you can, kind of see when, oh, there goes, Joe and Sally and Dimitri, they're going into a meeting together. Okay, I kind of know what's going on, and they come out and they tell me what happened. We're in the break room, and I find out about a decision that's been made. There's a lot that happens just organically in a physical space together that when you're remote, you just don't know about, and you know it's happening, and you're not part of it, and it can be pretty disconcerting for teams. You know, that whole out of sight, out of mind saying really does, you know, hold true. So we're going to have to make conscious efforts as managers to overcome all of this. So when we talk about managing a remote team, what I want us to focus on today are things like the challenges, the concerns, but not just to dwell on them. I want us to come up with workable solutions that you take away from today to help you be more effective at managing your remote team. So one of the things I want us to uncover are challenges. And by challenges, I mean, what are the special circumstances that you're dealing with, or the lack of resources that you're having to deal with in this new reality of trying to manage a remote team? And before I have you guys start, well, actually, you can go ahead and start chatting that now. Darlene, if you'll watch the chat box for me, I want you guys to share and chat the specific challenges, those circumstances that are giving you fits. And while you're doing that, I do want to make a kind of a plug back to some previous webinars that we've done, because in the past we've kind of focused on you being the remote worker and how to prepare yourself, how to set up your environment, you know, how you can be most productive as an individual. And today we're really focusing on managing a remote team and keeping them engaged. So tell me, what are some of the challenges, those circumstances and resources that are giving you fits?
There are some really great responses that are coming through the chat, you know, communication styles, as far as how do you communicate with people remotely. That came from Rhonda too. Like, how are people doing? Being really in tune to, you know, are they mentally okay? Are they feeling good, like they're contributing and bringing value? You know, also introverts versus extroverts. Like, how is that impacting, and is there a difference? And, you know, trust. How do you build trust in a remote environment and keeping them engaged? Like, how do we really make contact with our people in order to take in, you know, keep them engaged as we go along, and helping them feel like they're doing meaningful work. So lots of great responses that are coming in here too. You know, Lindsay's also said boundaries, project urgencies, and even efficient collaboration. And then a couple of other, like Casey just said, you know, how do you reduce fear and anxiety and execute in times of uncertainty? Which, I mean, right now, if anything, all of us are going through those high levels of uncertainty where, you know, when will we be going to the office? Will we be going to the office? Is my work going to look the same? Will there be the same amount of work on there? So lots of great responses here, Stephanie.
Okay, good. Well, let's take it one more. You guys have given some good challenges. Let's expand on those and make sure that we're also capturing concerns. I did hear some of that about the trust and all of that. I mean, when I talk about concerns, I'm talking about, you know, the feelings that you have, the doubts, the uncertainties about either remote working itself as a concept or the remote team and those individuals. So what kind of concerns, if you guys would chat that in the chat panel so we can kind of discuss those.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Tiffany, because, you know, one of the things for management, and I know in my organization that we talk about is how do we know people are working and working productively. But as an employee, I'm also going to flip that. Like, how do I make sure that they know I'm working? Like, my fear is they don't think I'm working, right? Because they can't see me and they're not used to really, you know, it's not the same level of engagement and interaction that we're used to when we were in an office setting a few months ago. So I know that's one of the things that I'm experiencing. I'm going to put it out there to the group please chat us up and let us know what are your concerns and feelings and doubts.
Yeah.
Rhonda even
Darlene,
said, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you say that you kind of flipped it. It's not your distrust of others. It's that, do they trust me?
Yes.
Because, that's one of those things when you're used to, seeing people, they know you're busy. But I like that. That's kind of a different play on it, which is very valid. What else are we getting in the chat?
Yeah, like from a company perspective, am I contributing to the new urgent focus and direction? Rhonda said, which is a really great takeaway. And then, Emily says, how effective is virtual delivery versus in person? So those challenges of having a new delivery system, and are we being as effective as we once were? And just to kind of tie on to what Emily said, I think she brings up a really good point too, is I have to learn really, really quickly on how to do something differently in a new environment, right? So how do we help our teams really adapt and change really quickly? Be very, very agile with it.
Yeah. Any other concerns popping up? Any feelings and doubts?
No, and I'm going to kind of keep it out there to the group that, guys, if you think of something, put it out there for sure. So,
Absolutely. Chat away. So what I want us to do is to address these challenges and concerns. Let's delve into them so that we can share solutions. I've gathered some common challenges and concerns. So, Darlene, just make sure that the ones that I've already prepared for, if there's any that were just mentioned, and I was taking notes as you were mentioning what was in the chat, if there's any of those that I don't cover, make sure we come back to those to discuss. But yeah, I want us to focus today on, understanding and talking about the challenges and concerns, but more than that, I want us to come up with solutions. I want everybody to leave here with shared best practices and a game plan. What are you going to start doing today to be more effective at engaging and managing a remote team? So and I think someone mentioned this a little bit earlier, one of the big challenges that we're hearing about managing a remote workforce is that there was a lack of guidelines or policies. So I don't know if anyone, we can ask for chat, or we can take people off mute. I'm fine with just letting people, talk. But has anyone dealt with that? Does anyone have any best practices about what do you do about your remote work policies, especially if you didn't have any?
And so if you guys would like to come off of chat and address the group, we're excited about that. Do you have at the bottom of your toolbar a little reactions icon? And so if you hit your reactions icon, you should be able to see that pop up, and then we can take you off of mute, or I'm fine if we just unmute everybody, or you can hit us up in the chat box. So your call, Tiffany. How you want me to pull everybody off of mute?
We can try the unmute and just see if people can self-mute if you have background. Oh, look, Lindsay raised a hand.
Yay!
If you have any background noise, keep yourself on mute. But that way we can take everybody off of mute from your end, and if they want to speak up, they can. So let's go ahead and see what Lindsay's got.
Perfect. So Lindsay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. I think, there we go.
Yes, hi everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Okay, great, you can hear me. So I think when we talk about like the lack of guidelines and policies, I put in the chat about concerns around boundaries. And I think now is a good time for a lot of people, now that we've kind of gotten over the initial shock of swiftly adjusting to being and working from home and still trying to do work as usual. It is a good time to talk about boundaries and what those guidelines and policies look like, because I feel like at one level it's almost like people are thinking, right, or assuming that we're all just supposed to adjust and keep going as normal versus actually acknowledging and being explicit about, okay, this is our current situation. And because it's probably, there is still a lot of unknown, but how do we just be very direct and open with, this is the situation that we're working in now, and what is, like, how do we create that space for one another to work most efficiently and effectively in the space that we currently have. And I know it might look a little different for other people because some people's maybe HR departments or whatever that, their hierarchy looks like, maybe working on different policies and guidelines. And so some people are just waiting for direction. But I think we have to kind of take some ownership and kind of level up and lead up and kind of push back a little bit, and vocalize, what are some of our team's needs, and how do we provide some of those needs for them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I find that the majority of human nature is they want to do well. They want to know what the rules of engagement are, because most people want to play by the rules. And like you talk about the boundaries and those types of things, people need that. Has anyone dealt with, either a lack of the policies, or like how did, if you had a remote workforce already, but then it may have tripled, over a weekend, how did, with the one, it was carefully coordinated and choreographed, but the other, how did y'all deal with, going to remote kind of on the fly?
You can hit us up in the chat box if you're interested in talking to the group, or you can raise your hand through the system here. I know Maribel had her hand raised. I don't know if it's in direct relation to your question, Tiffany, but Maribel, I was going to go ahead and unmute you, and then if you'd like to contribute, share with us your thought.
Yeah, no, I was saying only that it's okay, but I don't have any question right now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So guys, if you are dealing with a lack of guidelines, policies, rules of engagement, when it comes to solutions, look, you got to pull something together quick. If you have existing policies, review them or update them to see what adjustments need to be made because of this unplanned work from home situation. Again, we just don't have the time for all the carefully choreographed stuff, and we didn't have time for the formal HR acknowledgments, to be, filled out, a course to be taken, and forms to be filled out and scanned and sent back into HR before it could be granted. We had to turn this on right away. So again, just work with HR and any other groups that are part of that to establish the guidelines, because people need to know what the rules of engagement are. Is it acceptable when you're working from home to, have, if you need to go take care of something, if you need to, from this hour to this hour, you need, from 9 to 10, you've got to do stuff with your kids for homework or schoolwork, childcare, whatever, but you're making that up some other time. Are flexible hours allowed? Are they not? The problem is when you have things that aren't clear and they haven't been communicated, you may have one worker who's doing it one way and assuming that those are the rules, and is, building up resentment because, well, so-and-so, I could see they weren't online, at 8 o'clock this morning. Was that the expectation? So you have to be really clear about the guidelines and the policies, those rules of engagement, to avoid unnecessary conflicts, especially among team members. Another thing that people are dealing with is having the IT or technology resources that they need. So they're dealing with some constraints. Has that been the case for anybody on our webinar today? Anybody deal with that one? Well, I can share a local story about that. So we did have a degree of work from home, very few on a permanent basis, but as needed, it was pretty well allowed. But our culture was a little bit anti-remote working. There were exceptions to that, and when it did happen, it was kind of an unusual, I've got a deadline, I've really got to, it wasn't that it was forbidden, it just wasn't very widely granted. So we found ourselves, we have a lot of back office, I work for Hancock Whitney Bank, so obviously we have our financial centers where, the public comes, but there's tons of back office support that make all that banking magic happen. So we had to very quickly deploy new resources. So it turns out I had just acquired a little over 100 laptops for a special project that we were doing. And, I had those, they were coming in. I think we'd just gotten our first shipment of 50 of the 100. So they were coming in and getting all set up, and we were going to put them in our super labs. And, we were all this planning that was going on, and all of a sudden, they needed my laptops. Because we have all of these people, contact center, our call center people, the deposit operations, loan operations, all this stuff that makes the bank work and function has to happen, but they can't come into the office anymore. So we had to very quickly redeploy existing resources and send those out, and very quickly get additional resources. Literally over a weekend, our IT team had to work to set up VPN. VPN is a process. It's not like you just click a button and it's all set up. There's things that have to happen for VPN to happen. And literally, it was just an all-hands effort to move fast and to get this set up. We have to keep the bank, working and operational. So when we talk about solutions there, you've got to develop a plan to deploy your resources, whether it's laptops, bring your own device, setting up VPN, making sure people have access to software that they need, Zoom, WebEx, Skype, any of these social collaboration tools. You've got to work with IT to make it happen, and you've got to work with your vendor folks. This isn't the time for your request for a new program to sit in vendor management for 6 weeks before you're in queue. So a lot of those things had to happen really quickly. Another challenge, and this is the big one, and it's something that was mentioned several times in the chat, is maintaining lines of communication. That's one of the biggest challenges in all of this. So I can share a couple things that that we have done as a company, and things that we've done, in individual groups about maintaining those lines of communications. But before I share, I want to hear from everyone else. What do we have in the chat panel? And I did see a couple of raised hands.
Yeah, so Lindsay had raised her hand pretty quickly. So Lindsay, I'm going to go ahead and try to unmute you on this side right here. And
oh, that was just a reaction to agree with a hand clap. Sorry, I wasn't raising my hand. Sorry, no, I was all for the lines of communication, and I was just, giving a little support. It looks like Rhonda probably has her hand up though.
It does.
Okay.
It does. So
Thank you for the clap, Liz.
Yes. Rhonda, I think I've got you unmuted.
Yeah, definitely in terms of the communication, sometimes I find in terms of our team, we're hit or miss. I think the challenging part is talking about, the things that are important for the moment. I'm the type of person who I could easily get so absorbed in my task and doing things and checking off boxes and getting things done, and communicating just a quick text or an IM works for me. And then I find the dynamics of a team is that other folks, they want to talk more about other things. And, I think about the, the Myers-Briggs of introverts versus extroverts, that's really just always something that is always underlying in terms of what works for me in terms of communication may not work for somebody else. And especially in this virtual world right now, being flexible is important. Speaking up for those of us who are introverts, we need to actually speak up and say, what type of communication is working for you, whether that's too much communication or, the need for more communication, and specifically maybe sometimes directions of what we're doing as a team. What is upper management speaking about? Being a banker also, like you, Tiffany, not being privy to those upper management meetings, bringing your team members up to speed on what's the powers that be speaking. That's the kind of things that I think that a lot of us are looking to receive communication on. In particular, for me, I want to hear more about what's our company saying. So just the fine lines of how we communicate differently, as well as knowing that virtual communication is different. That was a lot.
It is. Something that you just said kind of struck with me. You said, something about, is it too much communication? And one of the things that, as soon as you said that, I'm like, is there any such thing? Or is it the wrong type of communication? Because you talk about if you want to get a message out, send it at least 3 times, but if you're trying to do everything in an email, is that effective? Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not that it's too much communication, it's the wrong delivery method for the communication.
Yeah, spot on.
I agree with that too. Like, it would have been fine as an email a few months ago, but right now, hey, let me just pick up the phone and chat that out so that we get more of that connection with each other. That has been very helpful for our teams too.
Yeah. Anything else in the chat? Or any raised hands that I don't see?
So team check-in Zoom meetings, Casey, stated that in the chat box. That's been magical for us too. What about you guys, Tiffany? Y'all doing that on a daily basis?
Absolutely. And a lot of, because we are kind of spread out as an organization, unless you're like in a branch or in a deposit operations kind of work environment, we are kind of spread out. Like our teams, historically have been, I've got, this one's in Baton Rouge and that one's in Sarah Land. Hey, Stephanie. This one's in Covington and that one's in Gulfport. So we were already using a lot of like WebEx and that type of stuff. So, one of the things that's unique about this is, back then, maybe once a week or so, we were getting physically together. So it was, in addition to now, our virtual is our only means of communication. So that's what makes it very important. If you look at one of the solutions listed on the screen, is that you've got regular touch points, not only with the team, but with individuals on your team. And the verb here is schedule. Because if you just like, well, I'll call them tomorrow. No, you've got to make it happen because things are busy. I know a lot of what's gone on for banks here recently, especially with the Small Business Administration, the PPP loans and all that kind of stuff. We literally the work day would start at 6 a.m. and these teams were working until 4 a.m. the next day, grabbing a couple hours of sleep and getting right back on it again. We had to make ourselves have touch points in order to make things happen, or you get caught up in the day-to-day kind of stuff. So it's not like you can just grab someone in the hallway like before. So the regular touch points with teams and with individuals. Now, how often that is depends, and that's going to vary for each group. I mentioned this before, selecting the most appropriate option for the communication. Is a conference call sufficient? Do we have to all get on a WebEx or a Zoom? If you're not sharing your screen, sharing a document or needing to see people face to face, why are we on a webinar? use a conference call so I can, do laundry while I'm on the call, what have you. Or do we need to actually work on a document together? Do we need to be able to see things? Use your webinar and share your screen. Do you use the video or not? Now, I'm one of those, I don't like turning on the video. However, and Mike Frederick, thank you for this. I learned this last week. I need to get over myself because there's something about that unique presence. So even though we're virtual, at least having some meetings where you're going to turn it on, maybe not every one of them, but we need that. We need to see expressions. We need to pick up on those nonverbal cues. And quite frankly, sometimes we need to be forced not to multitask. And it's really easy to multitask if you're not sharing your screen or your video. And it's just, as human beings, it's just too tempting. So, know when to use the video in webinar. Also, there were certain things, like I mentioned before, when people were working the ungodly hours, and I didn't wait for my boss, to always contact me first. You can also reach out. I would just send literally a text message on my phone, to my supervisor because I knew that he was pulling those all-nighters, and I just wanted him to know I was thinking about him, that type of stuff. So instant messages. I know we have Skype internally, so we can do that. And sometimes an email is sufficient. I will mention one thing that we have been using is our intranet. And what we did was we established a special site on our intranet for business continuity that's specific to COVID-19. We had to get a lot of information out to 4,000 employees at a time. And we couldn't just, it's one thing to have it sitting in your email, but, you see the email, and then you're like, no, what did that say? So we put all of our COVID-19 related major communications on this intranet page. So every day you can go there and find out which branches we have are open, which ones have delayed openings. For a while we were doing like a hub and spoke type kind of deployment. So in cities, we would have locations where you could still come into the lobby, and others were drive-through only, so the hub and the spokes. And then literally overnight, we had to change that because things were ramping up with the spread of the virus, and we changed all of our financial centers to spoke. So it was, the lobbies were closed except by appointment. And, how do you manage those? So we had to communicate lots of information very quickly, and we needed a place. This has our announcements to the public in it, and so there's a copy of that. So it's just a really good resource. So if you're not utilizing something like that, I strongly recommend that you have, a consolidated place that people can go to refer to those communications. And the other one is ask as well as tell. The communication can't be all one directional where you get on and you're just the one speaking and delivering a message. You really need to check in. This was mentioned a little bit earlier about, the mental well-being of employees. You need to ask, how are you doing? And take those moments. Darlene, do we have anything in chat or any hands raised?
None of the hands raised at this moment. But Lindsay said something, when you said scheduled, like, I love that. She said intentionally, really, being very, very intentional. And I was going to tag on to, having that business continuity resource center. In addition to it, makes it an easy reference place for people to go back to versus if everything's just dumped through email and they have to go searching for their email.
Yeah,
makes it
through. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That central hub of resources makes it really easy for people to get the information they need when they need it and to go back to it when they need it as well. Tiffany, I have a question for you, and I found this to be very interesting change in dynamic with my team. We usually run on a very collaborative spirit. There's a lot of asking, people get to contribute. But I found sometimes in this time of uncertainty, they almost crave, just tell me exactly what you want me to do. I'm kind of curious if anybody else has experienced that kind of switch, or what has that been like for you too, that maybe you have to tell a little bit more than ask, or, what does that look like?
I think that's probably very common, just because in a disruptive time like this, it's all about do. It's like when a building is on fire, you don't say, hey guys, gather around, I have a message. The building's on fire, how do you feel about that? No, it's commanding and get out. There's the exit, So we're kind of in that disruptive event. So I can see that being definitely the case. What do our folks on the webinar say?
Yeah, so guys, if you have any thought about that ask versus tell, go ahead and raise your hand or hit us up in the chat box. I did want to share what Rhonda said. Her team, our company, throughout the month of April, they had a Zoom lunch and learn on mindfulness, including really coping with stress and anxiety. That's pretty fascinating too. Rhonda, do you want to can I take you off mute and share with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so our marketing team sought a specialist and offered to everyone throughout the company to attend about a half an hour lunch and learn. And the specialist, she would take us through just breathing skills and spoke of, different things that we can do at our desk to just help us physically work through the kinks of how your body feels when it's tensing up. I really had been feeling all of the things that she talked about, so I definitely took advantage of it. And even still now, because we're still in the midst of it, utilize those skills. I showed them to my kids and my husband, and it was just a really nice investment in me. And I was so grateful that the company had offered that to us as associates.
Yeah, I mean, we're human beings, we're not robots. So we, that the mental well-being and physical well-being is important. So Lindsay, I don't know if you're clapping or asking a question. I see Lindsay just raised a hand.
That was a real hand raise this time. Thank you so much. And so the question is kind of built off of Rhonda's comments, because I've been in a lot of spaces and chats within the last week or so, talking about kind of activities and how are we engaging our teams and, icebreakers potentially. And one thing that I recommended was, I know one icebreaker that I find to be a lot of fun is to put up a few pictures and just allow people to kind of choose which ones represent them in that moment, whether it be feelings or emotions, and then a few people can share what that is. So Rhonda's comments around, the mindfulness and what it's really helped her, I just wanted to say, I think that is a little bit more, hopefully more people want to adapt that, because I think, again, back to my earlier comment, is I think it's easy to suppress a lot of what we're doing, what we're feeling as we're going through things, and to be able to kind of bring those things at least to the forefront, to just recognize it for a moment. It might not be the time to completely unpack it, but I do think it helps a little bit to at least acknowledge it and before you move on to that next task. So I really wanted to thank Rhonda for sharing that, because I think that's good. I'm glad to hear that that's something that's going on in other spaces.
I do like that idea. I wrote it down, and there's so many memes out there anyway, which I love. So that would be a good way to kick off your next team meeting, just to get some dialogue going. And we're going to talk about this. It's one of the solutions coming up, is that, even when we meet face to face, you don't just come into the room, take out your pen, and start the meeting. There's, hi, how are you, So, and I know a lot of times, especially because we're going literally, 8 to 9 is this WebEx, 9 to 10 is the next one, 10 to 11 is the next one. So they're back to back, and you just get down to business. Okay, and there's not a whole lot of engagement and just social. Hi, how are you doing? That comes naturally when we're face to face with someone. You kind of have to make a special effort to do it virtually, and I like that idea of just sharing like a picture, some images, and letting people pick the one that fits them best at that moment. I like that idea. I'll share one other thing when we talk about these lines of communication. It's something that we have done ever since this pandemic officially happened. Every Friday, our CEO releases a video message. So they're usually pretty brief, just a couple minutes. We've had a few. I had one that particularly went, I think, 9 or 10 minutes. But we had a lot. He had a lot to convey and to reassure us about and to explain what was happening. So that one actually ran pretty long. But it goes out in an email to the entire associate base, employee base, and you just click a link. We have a corporate YouTube. So it starts playing that video from him, and it really has been a valuable lifeline. And to hear that reassurance from your CEO, and even sometimes not the reassurance, it's just the statements of fact, and the encouragement that we are going to get through this. And he's being able to acknowledge efforts of different teams. That's been a really, I think, valuable experience that we've had. We've got a few people on today, Susan, Iris, Wes, and Stephanie, who are in our company. So I'm interested if you feel the same way I do about those CEO video chats, but I really do appreciate them. Anything else about communication before we move on? All right. Has anybody else had to completely redo the way you do business on the fly? I mentioned this one, earlier with the hub and, we went from, we're a bank, come on in, cash a check, make a deposit, do a loan, to, don't come in. If you do, wear a mask, and, all this. I mean, it literally changed. And at one time it was, oh, don't wear masks because, this was before it was really this valid thing, this pandemic. There was kind of this, we don't want to invoke fear, so don't put on a mask. And then literally the next morning, no, if you feel comfortable wearing a mask, wear a mask. And then it was, to spread and all that. So, things change really, really quickly. We've had to completely change the way we do business as a bank. But also, and, this is the Association for Talent Development, most of the people on this WebEx are in the training business, the learning business. We had to completely redo our deployment methods, and honestly, it's not always the best delivery method to do something virtually or online, but it's the one we're forced with, so we're making the best of it. So I'm interested for people to share their success stories or their challenges specifically about implementing new ways of doing business. And if Stephanie Weaver doesn't speak up on her own, I'm going to call on her myself.
Love it. While we're waiting for everybody to hit us up in the chat box with that, one of the things that we had to do are mandatory courses and how we deploy those regulatory courses out to groups. The strategy at the beginning of the year, that honest to goodness kind of got trashed, and we had to start over. How do we pause? We know things are different. We don't want to add extra pressure, but how are we going to catch up and actually get this requirement done for the end of the year? This is a big change for us to look at how we were going to, encourage them take those courses, but not put pressure on people and help them through those times too. So that was one of the big things that we had to change. I think Stephanie is trying to contribute since you called her out.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Can you hear
I know
me?
you've got some experience. Yeah, we can hear you.
So I've been trying to talk a few times and just realized that you couldn't hear me.
I'm sorry. Good to hear you now. Go ahead.
Well, great. So what I was going to say earlier is that I have truly enjoyed those CEO videos. A lot of times if they send out lengthy emails or communications, I struggle with reading them or reading them timely, I guess, but I love the video. So how has life changed for us in the training department? It was an immediate, we need every instructor-led class that you have converted to virtual in about a week. So that was our challenge. And we did the best we could and incorporated as many engaging activities as we could. But what I have discovered is we probably weren't prepared as with many virtual tools as we truly need to be successful virtually. So I have taken on a second job of going out and finding vendors that can help with that virtual training. So shout out to Michael because I took a few away from his webinar last week. But that's what we're doing now is we're trying to find, and I really think it's our new normal. I was telling one of the vendors, is it really jump-started a process that we probably already should have started because that is our new way of doing things, I think.
That's true. And, you know, before it would have been harder to get the money, you know, to ramp up our virtual delivery tools. But now it is an absolute necessity. So it's easier to get funding for those, you know, newer ways of doing things. So guys, just to kind of cap off this one, you know, when you're trying to implement the new ways of doing business, you got to do some very fast analysis. Each situation, each department, each group, each individual, figure out what's going to have to happen, work out the logistics, barrel through to make things happen if you have to. Communicate what the new way of doing business is, and I mentioned before, like having that business continuity page for the pandemic on our intranet has been very, very valuable as a means for people to go back and check the resources. You can always go back, now what was that? You know, instead of searching for the email, it's in the email too, but it's a lot easier to find on that consolidated page. And you just got to do it and deploy. Here's our next one. If anyone, well, we kind of talked about this already, having challenges with interviewing, onboarding new hires, and training employees, whether they're new hires or ongoing. I bet everyone's hand would go up there. So I'm going to assume everyone's got the challenge. What are you doing? What are your solutions? What are your best practices?
I know one of the things while people are contributing over to in the chat box, we converted some of that new hire training to a virtual VILT platform with smaller groups with more trainers so that they could have a little bit of a one-on-one experience. You know, thank goodness in our Dallas operation this week, we actually went back to the office and had a new hire class started. So we know we're going to need, you know, in order to abide by social distancing, it wasn't as large of a class that we would normally have. So one of the changes was how do we take in, you know, hire the minimum amount of people to be safe with social distancing and know that we're going to have more back-to-back classes in order to take and fill that business need as well.
Yeah, that's a new reality there because, I mean, I mentioned before we were in the middle of a project where we're actually using super labs. We have training labs already. They might have anywhere from 5 to 12 machines in them, you know, computers, workstations. For this effort, we were looking at doing 30 laptops per room. These were, you know, large rooms, putting 30 people in at a time, a day, day and a half at a time, over and over and over again for back-to-back rollouts that we were doing, we've had to completely revamp that for that project because we can't pull 30 people in a room. And we're predicting that we will not be able to do that at all the remainder of this year. So, you know, what do you do? And at some point, can we bring back an element of instructor-led where maybe it's not 30 people in that room at a time, maybe it's closer to 15 or what have you, to make sure a minimum of 6 feet is apart. We're talking about, you know, writing the guidelines for disinfecting, you know, wiping down keyboards, the mice, you know, all that kind of stuff in between classes. So you've got to allow time for that. But what normally we could have rolled out, you know, in, you know, a month or two as a massive project is going to take us significantly longer. And we are using some pretty, you know, good methods to kind of fill in the gap when we can't have the instructor-led. But you mentioned this, you know, I call it a soft freeze on hiring, where it's not that you're freezing, but it's very selective as to which positions you're hiring for at this moment. That's something to consider. It may not be feasible in all cases, but it is something to consider. Make sure you're using the technology. And when you do, and you're converting the in-person, I do recommend a very good blend of delivery methods. So this is something Stephanie and I and folks on her team are working on right now, is just making sure you can't take what would have been a day-long instructor-led and have a day-long webinar. You can't do that. The brain, the body, is not capable at paying attention virtually the same way it is in the classroom. And we're all joking and kidding ourselves if we think they're 100% paying attention when they're in the classroom too. But definitely there's just way too many distractions. So it's a good blend of, you know, something synchronous where we pull everyone on a webinar together. We do a quick demo of a new system, talk about, you know, some of the logistics, and then we send them on their way. They do an online course, or they do some practice sessions, or the managers carry out what's called a manager toolkit. So we've come up with like coaching in a kit, and we give the managers the talking points. So we kind of turn them into the facilitator. We give them the talking points, give them, you know, prompts about how to respond to questions and that type of thing. And then, so you've got some synchronous stuff going on, you've got some asynchronous stuff where they're doing it on their own, and then coming back together to address, okay, how did that go? What were the issues? What did you challenge? You know, what was a challenge? That type of stuff. And just making sure that you ensure the interactivity and the engagement. I know we've done a good job in the last several webinars about, you know, how do you build that engagement into the training. So we're not going to go into that here today. We do have those recorded if you want to go back and look at those. So here's some ideas for you guys to take away when it comes to the interviewing and the onboarding and the training. Let me move on to some of the more emotional or feelings, trusting that employees are actually doing the work. You know, I would just say have the frequent check-ins, schedule them, make them regular, but also have some impromptus. Not that you're trying to catch somebody, but, you know, just, and set that, let people know, just like, you know, in the office, they can expect for you to, you know, walk down the hall and pop your head in. You know, it's okay to pop your head in, like on a Skype message or something like that, a text message, an email, and just check in and see how people are doing. And I would say when it comes to this element of trust, you're going to get what you give to a large degree. So focus on the results of their efforts, not their seat time. Because I know plenty of people, even in the office, who are in their seat working but are not being productive. So you can't measure seat time. You really need to measure results and have very clear measurement factors already built in. I expect this to be done on this date. These 3 elements will be included, that kind of stuff. You've got to be real clear about what your expectations are. Look at those success measures and give people, timelines. We need that. We need to know. We all do best with just a little bit of, that stress of deadline. We all do better with a little, not too much of that, but just the right sweet spot of stress. Are there any other comments in chat, or does anyone have their hand raised about that one, Darlene? Okay. Oh, Darlene, you might be muted, or maybe it's me.
No, it's me.
Okay.
Not this time, but I did take and share with everybody the Engaging Your Remote Workforce document that you prepared to help everybody. I know it's at 1 o'clock right now, so I wanted to get everybody that document.
So where did the time go?
I know, when you're having fun.
Goodness. Well, yeah, make sure, because I do have a lot of these solutions listed out on there. If you can stay, I'll keep talking. If you have to leave, I understand. You're not hurting my feelings. I'm going to keep going, Darlene, and those who can stay are welcome to. And if you have to drop off, I completely understand. Let's talk about another challenge, and it's dealing with distractions. So one of the things that happened with this unplanned, I remember, Michael, you said last week in the webinar, you're like, I've been working from home for years, so this is nothing new to me, but you've got a system worked out, so, the kids are at work, are at school from this time to that time, and when they're not, they're in this daycare or they're at this summer camp. Well, we didn't have benefit of, school's closed, daycare's closed. Summer camps are not happening, in a lot of situations. That after-school care is not available. So we were very careful, at least my boss was, about saying, listen, I understand there's going to be a dog barking occasionally. There might be a child who runs in, and then, we need to be patient with each other, understanding and realistic in our expectations that these aren't the best ideal circumstances, but we're all making it work. And also dealing with distractions, just remember there were distractions in the formal workplace too. So, we were never completely engaged, productive 8 hours a day anyway. There's the person who stops by your office and you chat for about 5 minutes about something. So there were distractions before. Let's not forget that. And let's be realistic and understanding in our expectations and allow people to deal with those things, because you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're worried about, your child or something like that, you're not focusing on work anyway. Another one is this whole thing about feeling isolated and disconnected. I'm a very social person. I need to be around people or I get a little melancholy. And I found that happening, even though I'm all day long on WebEx or, something like that, I still just kind of felt disconnected because things aren't the same. So communication, going back to all of those things that we just said with communication earlier, are spot on. Frequency and quality of the communication matter. And allow some time for some social interaction. We have made recently a concerted effort to, when we get together for our team calls, to take the first 5 minutes or so and just say, how was your weekend? What do you have going on? How's your kids? Things that we would have naturally said to each other in the hallway, instead of just getting right down to the business at hand, we are allowing for some social interaction in our remote work settings. Another thing is making sure that all of this is effective, the meetings, the training. You got to engage people. You got to select the appropriate delivery method, be clear and concise, and make it easy to get to information, whether that's a repository, videos, whatever it is. But to have effective meetings, we need to engage everyone. Not like I'm doing right now, just running through the material to get through it all. So let me talk about this recognition stuff too. You know, one of the things that happens, you know, if we're in a physical setting together, you can, you know, give the smiles and say out loud that someone's done something well or congratulate someone. Recognizing especially extraordinary efforts if people are going above and beyond to deal with a challenging situation, and just showing your appreciation can still be done virtually. You're going to have to make it a priority, just like you do, you know, in the physical workplace. And select the right method. What matters most to that employee? Would they prefer you just call them and verbally one-on-one express your sincere appreciation? Would they prefer that, you know, you acknowledge and let the group know what's been going on? Do they like written thank you notes? Do you have an employee recognition tool that you can use? We have something that we have internally labeled the value of you, and it's a way that we can publicly let everyone in the company know, you know, you can do thank you notes, you can award value of you points. So every manager has a set number of points given to them per quarter that can be awarded to associates. And the way this works is if I nominated someone on Stephanie's team for value of you points, those points would come out of her bucket of points. So she would approve the recognition, and those points add up. I mean, and real quickly you can have like $25 gift cards at Walmart, or, you know, what have you, or you can use it at the company store. So it's just a way, and there's public thank you notes that you can do. So if you have those, use them. And if you don't have them, come up with something similar to it, even without engaging with a vendor, you know, to have something formal set up. There's things you can do. Another thing that is helpful, have a virtual work party. You know, everybody loves a pizza party, right? So why not? And this is, oh, somebody on the webinar a little earlier mentioned something similar to this. Whether it's a pizza party or a lunch and learn, you know, brown bag lunch, bring it. Look, everybody on the team does it at the same time. We get on the WebEx. And, you know, if you really want to do it upright, have the pizza delivered to them so they don't have to buy their own pizza. You know, have the pizza delivered for their virtual pizza party. These are just, you know, some ideas. You know, have, you know, send them, you know, money so they can go pick up their own donuts that morning. We're all going to have a donut discussion that morning, and to kick the day off. And here I'm providing, you know, the donuts. I can't physically provide them, but here, go get your donut and let's meet. So those are some things that we can do. Let me pause here and just see anything in chat, any questions, any hands raised.
I was going to take an add to what you said. We every once in a while on Friday, like, have a little cocktail hour. It's 4 o'clock. We're going to cut it. You know, we're going to call it quits a little early. Let's get on a Zoom, enjoy each other's company, not work related, and have a cocktail. And if you don't drink, a bottle of water works too. But it's just
That's right.
really great way to kind of connect with people and bring that human element. You know, to the environment.
Yeah. Is anybody else doing that? Do we have any raised hands? Is anybody else doing something similar to that? Anybody want to do that?
I'm always up for cocktail hours, so just send me an email. I will join
Okay.
you.
Sounds good. So guys, what's your biggest takeaway from today's session? Think about that. You're happy to chat it in the chat box if you'd like. Just want you to think about what did we talk about today that you're like, you know what, I need to do that. I need to make sure, you know, I'm having those social moments. I need to make sure that I'm communicating the right way. Whatever it is. I would love to hear about that in the chat. And also, I do want to remind everybody about our website. Go there for upcoming events and to get the PDF summary of the challenges, concerns, solutions. It's a 2-page document on PDF that kind of summarizes all the things. Darlene, is there anything that we had earlier identified in chat that I did not address?
You know, I think we covered everything. There were some really great ideas that it came together, but there's nothing that is actually standing out to me. So I think you did an excellent job. Tiffany, I did, if it's okay with you, wanted to let everybody know that we put a little survey in the link. It literally is less than 2 minutes, like 5 questions. If you guys wouldn't mind taking a moment and filling out the survey, we would really appreciate it. Just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Awesome. Do we have any chats or hand raises left?
Yeah, Rhonda texts and says, hey, the session was really good, and she's got some really great takeaways. I also wanted to thank people who contributed in our chat box, and also like Rhonda and Lindsay, who's spoke up during the call. It was really nice to hear your voices. That was great.
Very good.
All right.
Well, thank you guys. Really much appreciate it. We hope to see you in July and again in August for our upcoming events, the Disney and the design thinking. That'll be really good.
Yeah, and Tiffany, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to put this together and share this great information with the team. So on behalf of the chapter, thank you.
I hope it was beneficial to everyone. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.